Greetings of the day. Uh, the mind is in its place can make a heaven of hell and hell of a heaven. Welcome to the panel discussion, Envisioning Future Cities Appertaining to Planet, People and Profit. This discussion is not to thrust one man's view on the topic, but the result of various painstaking effort based on the surveys and data collected in the topic. Today, the great minds of the panel discussion team brainstorm and take it forward to a productive, fruitful, beneficial end for you, me, them, and humanities. Most cities are in the process of becoming smart, using data and technology to boost transit, energy use, safety, air quality, or to drive economic growth. Others are designed to be smart from the beginning, and that's a concept that is about the present and the future. So, is self-sufficiency a dream of future city design? Let's hear it from Mr. David, Managing Director and Founding Partner, SDGx. He works on community and is a firm and passionate believer in building tech for good. Over to you, Mr. David.
Now there I am. Yep. Sorry about that. I was actually writing something in the chat box. First of all, a bit of applause. That was a really interesting art piece and the music behind it and everything else. Prithika, introducing myself?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, just a very quick summary. I'm Canadian. I did my undergrad in economics and finance. Most of my work was in the private sector in corporate, working with corporate finance. But I did get the itch to go back to school, and I ended up back on the East Coast of the States, did a lot of my master's and my graduate work, a lot in the area of social technology, so the impact of technology on society. I ended up back into Europe, where I was part of the first .com, 95 to 2000, which was a really interesting time when you have the technology of internet and how much internet has really impacted society, disrupted business, really started a lot of mobility, created e-commerce, digital currencies, payment systems, and it really had a large impact. And I had a few startups there that went very well. But when I was starting to think of what I wanted to do in the future, I was really starting to look at, I'd done startup and been an entrepreneur, I've done the corporate work and academia research. So I looked at the development sector, and I joined the United Nations about 12 years ago in Geneva, in Switzerland. And I came out to Bangkok, where I am right now, to join the United Nations here at the regional center, really working with all the countries between Afghanistan, Japan, and all the way down to Fiji and the Pacific Islands. And the focus really was on social innovation, social entrepreneurship, and also impact investing. So as we start to shift, and the story is really not about me. You see, I'm a bit of a hybrid, an accidental hybrid. I started in one country, ended up in other countries. I started in one sector, ended up in other sectors. My education started one way and went all the way to the other spectrum. And it's really interesting now because I think we are really entering into a hybrid economy. We're entering into a hybrid society. And I think that COVID-19, the pandemic, has really sort of accelerated this digital transformation that we're going through. And the focus is shifting. We see this now, that the focus is shifting towards humans. Not so much around profitability, not so much around technology, but everyone now is starting to look at where do citizens sort of fit into this structure, into the equation. So we see social innovation, we see social finance, we see sustainable capitalism, and how this applies now to how we live, urban areas, rural areas, how that applies to all the new things as we go forward. I think now it's going to be challenging, but I think there's huge upside. I think there's huge opportunity. And the humanity and the arts traditionally are the leaders. They are the leaders of change, musicians, artists, philosophers. These are the leaders of change, and it's really interesting now to see how this all comes together. Thank you.
Now, I welcome all our other panelists as well. Mr. Atsushi Taira, Managing Director, Mistletoe, and he's a very big futurist, and He is focusing on a community called Audacity. It is mainly the driving force of youth, which based on which he's focusing on a lot of other projects. And I also welcome Mr. Mahesh Kumar, Program Director, ECOLABS. He focuses on SMEs and startups in core innovation efforts, supporting early stage investment and project financing for sustainability and clean energy projects. And let me also welcome Mr. Z, the musician. He's a composer pianist who has done a lot of composition for films and international brands.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, I'm a little bit hesitant because after the beautiful, art and music, and suddenly a lot of uncles showing up. Oh, Z, you're still young, so maybe no problem. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Kritika.
So, Mr. Taira-san, I request you to give a short intro about yourself.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, my name is Atsushi Taira, and I'm running a Mistletoe Singapore. Maybe I will talk about a little bit about Mistletoe itself. Mistletoe is like, it's kind of Christmas sort of a decoration, and famous in US, kissing under mistletoe is kind of, the song, right? So first of all, sounds like a very happy moment, right? But if you look at, Wikipedia, it said that mistletoe is the keystone species in the forest to maintain the ecosystem. So it's actually, we like to be more important, even small, keystone species to maintain the startup and also innovation ecosystem. That's actually the behind the sort of story. And then we actually more focusing on startup and entrepreneurs, turning their challenges into a positive social impact. And then obviously it's a lot of innovators and startup are coming out from startup world because, incubants is of course important, but sometimes corporate need to focus on profit. Of course, that's by definition. And then, they are maybe struggling, how it could be balanced, like environment, sustainability versus profit, and also humanity always are struggling. Whereas, the startup is more like focusing on innovation purely. And then that's why we believe all changes could happen from, even though it is so small, leaping frog innovation and then change the society for better future could happen from startup and those innovations, right? And then we like to support innovators and innovation by community because we are targeting the very deep issues, and then deep issue could not be solved by one single, startup or person. Rather, we to get together to form the, different kind of opinions, and sometimes in contradiction would happen, but it's okay to discuss how to solve, right? Because no easy answer at all. And that's actually our approach. So we are not actually a fan, not actually a VCs, more like a supporting startup to make them, the true, real, better world, right? And then sometimes we invest, and also sometimes run together a project, and also innovation program, something like that. Then at the end, we have more than 15 countries presence, and also 200 more, yeah, and the startups. So that's my short sort of introduction.
Now, without any further delay, let's start our panel discussion. Is 100% self-sufficiency a dream of future city design? Let's hear it from Mr. David.
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, there I am. Can you, sorry, can you repeat the question? It was a bit garbled. My internet connection is a bit wonky.
Is 100% self-sufficiency a dream of future city design?
That's a huge question. And I think we were having this conversation before a little bit, but I think I think there is a massive shift towards human-centered design. I think there is a big shift happening right now across the board, whether it's corporate, whether it's government, really just to focus on the human. The concepts of smart city over the past 10 to 15 years have really focused on technology more than the humans inside. And I think this is now having to change. And there's a couple drivers behind this. And I think one of the main drivers is really around a lot of cities, nations, companies. The ability to attract talent is really important. And so the way you design cities, the way you design urban areas really have to focus on how are you going to actually attract talent and develop talent within that? Because without talent, you cannot go forward. Economic development, new job creation, well-being, environmental protection, these different types of things, they all have to come together. And I think we're starting to see that when you get into the concept of sustainable urbanization, but also when you start to look at what the future is going to hold. Now that we're all going virtual, and the ability to learn from home, students, work from home, the ability to do a lot of work, a lot of the activities, daily activities from home, plus digital payment systems and e-commerce where you can order things rather the logistics systems are getting much more efficient. I think we're going to see a bit of a shift towards ruralization. So I think, how do you develop and how do you really think about rural economic development or ruralization with all these different factors coming in at the same time? So I think as much as sustainable urbanization is becoming really doable, especially with some of the new technologies, I think also we have to start include the concept of ruralization as well. And what does that mean now as we start to move into second and third tier cities, as well as to rural villages?
Yeah.
Point noted. So can we hear now from Mr. Taira about his views?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I think it's more matter of we should, right? 100% self-sustaining, because we are talking about planet, the Earth, and then we know it's not sustainable. Everybody know it, right? But we just could not do it somehow, right? And that's why actually we supporting the project here, because that must have, right? It's not a question of the, okay, either we should do or not. I think all we need to focus on how we can do it, how 100% self-sustaining. Of course, it's not easy. That's why I think it's better to start earlier, soon now. And then, especially now we are facing pandemic, right? So actually we have been talking about, self-sustaining and also environmental friendly and the climate change, right? A lot of discussion happened, but be honest, nobody feel like urgency. But now people realize COVID happened. Of course, COVID initially, of course, more diseases, but now people realize COVID revealed a lot of weakness of the societies, each country, right? We don't want to see maybe, but it was exposed, right? And then people now realize, oh my God, a lot of issues are happening, and then those are not tapped. Then I think that's the kind of moment we have. And then that's why I think it's now high time to say this, even though it's a crazy idea, but okay, we should do that. We can do it. And then technologically, I believe it is possible. That's why Project Share is focusing, okay, initially 1 or 2 people try to make the living self-sustaining 100%, right? That's a prototype and also almost like an experiment. But I think it is possible, right, if we want to do that. Of course, cost-wise, maybe not feasible, not easy, and also technology is not, I think, perfect. But I think, we will want to try, really want to do it. I think it is possible. That's why I think it's important to do it now and then try it now. That mindset and passion is so important. And then also, we realize the current city format is not working, right? It's a too much centralization and an urbanization program. And then because of that, COVID is easily, spread out. And then also now we experience work from home. And then be honest, today I'm work from home and then no problem. And then it's possible if people want to do it and try to do it. Then why we could not pursue decentralized format rather than, centralized format, right? That also I think are possible. Then in combination of the decentralized lifestyle and also more online versus just physical, and plus, innovation kick in, I'm sure it could be realized. Thank you.
Very interesting points. Now, let's hear from the artists. As we all know, artists are revolutionary and being a part of driver for all the movements. So let's hear it from Z. How do you think the intangibles can be included into city design?
So maybe some interesting story to share. So I noticed this thing about music, like composers creating music, sometimes getting really proud of the fact that nobody understands their music because it's so deep. But that makes no sense to me. I feel the point of art itself is to connect human beings, with who we are, with the past, the present, and also the future, and to help us see possibilities. I mean, you talk about the realization of the human potential. I don't think it's as amplified anywhere else. That just like okay, it is amplified somewhere else. But if you look at performing arts, you look at scientific discoveries, then you realize actually there's so much in the human imagination, where intuition can bring us. And to me, that has always been really fascinating. Like one of the first things I learned was, so I got really interested in architecture and design. One of the things I really like about design is the fact that it's before the beauty part, like before it's supposed to look beautiful, look cool and stylish, it's always functional. So you realize the interesting about music is not always the case. Like if you have a piece of music, if it's about the composer, like what he has to say, it may not be necessarily something that audience can connect with. But design seems to, I mean, like areas like graphic design, product design, and design always seems to find this nice balance between what looks good and also serves a function. So if you talk about the intangibles, I would think a lot about like what is actually implied. When you design a space, when you have a place where you work, like do people are able to just raise their head and make eye contact, have a nod? This is the human factor, right? It's the same thing when you sit in an orchestra, you sit in an ensemble. It's the little things that allow this very subtle interaction. This is the intangible that allows people to be connected. And I feel this connection is so important. I like what Taira-san was mentioning at the end. It's strange that because of COVID, we start to actually use technology for what it was intended for. People use technology for showing off and things like that, but it's for this true idea of communication over large distances instantaneously. That was what it was truly designed for. And it's such a great point because now that we can't be close, we actually treasure and appreciate more the time where we can be close, if you know what I mean. As with all the things that we have missed, and maybe there's this really good balance between less physical traveling, and also a physical connection. And then if you find that good balance, I think it's so great because you start to appreciate the physical time you spend with someone else even more, and it becomes like a really special thing. Most of the time, like it's exactly what's happening now. You spend most of the time on Zoom. While you have friends on Zoom for 10 hours. I have no idea how that actually works, like 10 meetings in a day, and then they hang out for a beer. So that was one of the funniest things. Like one of the first posts my friend shared when the lockdown restrictions were lifted here was himself having beer at this place. And I realized it wasn't about himself. It was about him being in that space, watching people having that beer, so there's that connection. And that is so fundamental and important, right? So, the situation with we are all in now, it's very tricky and it's a difficult time for everyone. But I think also there's so much we learned from it, and it's sort of implied in the video we did as well. So, yeah.
Having talked about connection and planning and how life has moved, let's hear it from Mahesh. What do you think about it, Mahesh?
Yeah, hello everyone. Good afternoon, Mahesh. Yeah, I've been patiently listening to David's view on decentralizing, Taira-san's view on starting a city, keeping an individual in mind. I think that itself is a big shift in perspective on how cities are designed. I think most of the cities has been predominantly in the last 100 years, ever since city design come, it's very much top down. And fundamentally, the aspects of city design and the urbanization has been driven by economics. So, and the pursuit of economics actually leads to me a bigger concern, because the pursuit of economics have created certain inequalities, come what may. I would actually look at inclusive in a much different way. I would love to keep what would the future of youth would be. The housing has gone extremely high and expensive. The job markets are extremely uncertain. There's no guarantee with COVID situations and economic crisis, geopolitical risk and climate risk. So how will the youth plan for a city? Will they get into housing debt? And will they adopt to similar city lifestyle? Or will they be more willing to share and keep more less uh, greed, but actually more sharing economy of city design could make it more inclusive rather than just making it one. So that's one way of looking how we can add sharing as part of future city design. The second aspect of inclusivity I would look at is, which I'm personally passionate about, is being how to include, which I keep debating about, is how to bring the intangible equations of care and nurture and trust and safety. I think Singapore stands for security, and that's not something which you can measure, and safety quickly, right? It has a wonderful system. I would love to have every city designed with more safety for women, more safety for children to walk down. So I would love to keep that as another part of inclusive design as city or planners to bring in. The third aspect of inclusivity would be care and nurture. There are a lot of left outs in the pursuit of economy, which I'm personally passionate about. Is about the disabled people. It's about the blind and deaf people. And how do we learn different sign language, which I keep talking about, so that we could communicate? And how does it all start from city? And how do we design buildings, not just urbanizing and going vertically up, though it's bound to happen, but also include the people despite of inequalities? These are different aspects of how I would look into inclusivity. So look into the future of the youth, and the current economic situation, make it less unequal. So I would love to build cities not by neighborhoods, but more by community driven by principles and values of what you would love to do. And how do you orchestrate these things are not by engineering and technology. It's by understanding maybe people like Z through emotion and arts, or maybe more ethnographers. Those kind of things needs to be brought in more, because the economist pursuit will always not treat it equal. But at the same time, we need to have a better balance between economy and profits in inclusivity design. At the same time, balance probably people and planet. So I would love to bring the intangibles in this way. May advocate more for people and planners here. So that's my few cents.
Having brought about that topic,
Yeah.
can future city be totally inclusive? Now let's hear it from David.
I mean, inclusive is something really interesting, and picking up from what the others are saying. I mean, when you talk about inclusivity, you're really talking about systems. And then you start to look, because each individual is different. And it's like Z was talking about design. But design on one side, you have private design or private sector design, let's say, and public good design. And private sector design is there for diversity. So when you're building urban areas, when you're building buildings, cars, all the products and what people consume, you design for diversity so people have options and maximize options, because people are always different. But when you start to look at public design, then you have to start take a systems sort of approach. And I think when you talk about inclusivity, citizens, humans, people, they have to be part of that community, and that community is a system. And often we look at, nature as something over there and humans as something over here. Well, we're just part of nature. I mean, we're part of that system. So I think when you start to look at cities have to sort of be designed from a systemic sort of viewpoint where people can be included. People of all diversities can be included, because inclusivity has some sort of resonance of equity. People have equal opportunity to be included. And so we have to start looking at equities. And equities, again, are much more of a public good. It's much more of a systems approach. Everyone should be able to enjoy the opportunities of being included and being inclusive. So I think, again, when we start to look at city design and how we want to do it, inclusive, sure, I think it is terribly possible to do. And I think, again, some of the newer technologies would do that. It's something that we look at with SDGx, that logo over there. It's something we also look at there because you do need the research component. You have to really start to understand how consumer behaviors and citizen behaviors are shifting. We really do actually have to build up, so we have to reform and rethink about how we educate, what types of skills are going to be required. Going back to what Mahesh was saying with youth. Youth are going to be a big part, specifically here in Asia. You've got the fastest growing youth bubble. You've got the fastest growing middle class here, the future consumers, if you will. And Asia will be the engine for a lot of the new economy that will come out. But at the same time, when you look at climate, for example, the challenges that we have with climate right now, Asia is going to be very much impacted because there's a lot of coastal lines. There's a lot of mixture on weather, and the weather is getting much more challenging, let's say again. So I think, yes, definitely, urban areas, rural areas can be more inclusive. I think it's a mindset shift toward more of a systems approach, more of a public good approach, where we can actually start to include a lot of the equities. Equities have to be part of this somehow.
Noted on that. Talking about that, let's hear it from Mr. Patterson. What is your view about building an inclusive city?
Yeah, inclusive, of course, quite important concept. And I should say, if you look at the current city design basics, when it happened, right? It's about maybe 100 years ago. What was the purpose? The purpose is more like do the job quickly, efficiently. That was actually initial intent, right? It's nothing wrong. At that time, industrial era has been started, and it's quite important to grow that economy at that time, right? And then people believe, oh, because of that growth of the economy, all people will be, happiest. And then trickle down would happen, right? Even though wealthy and not wealthy gap would happen, kind of trickle down would happen. That was a belief. And then we know, unfortunately, that design didn't work and doesn't work, right? Then why we are continuing the same format now? We need to realize that format, assumption was there, but assumption was actually, unfortunately, didn't work, doesn't work. That's why I'm saying current city could not be totally inclusive because focus was mainly workers, right? It used to be maybe factory worker. Now, white collar workers. But it's only part of the population, maybe 20, 30, 40, early 50s, and mainly men, right? Then, design basic is totally wrong. Not wrong, but I think different. That's why I think taking out all those things, okay, how we can develop a city for everybody, that should be the starting point, right?
Yeah, Taira, and I'd just like to add maybe a couple of thought process. Okay, Kritika, you also have a question from the audience, but
Yes, I'm just looking.
I'm just trying to compliment Taira's and I generally look at all the cities. This is just a question to maybe to David and Taira's. And I always, when we go to the city, every city has something called the economic powerhouse, or what we in Singapore famously call the central business districts, right? And a whole rush is to move more towards the city center, where you are there next to the power, next to the economy, and the congregation and the densification happens just because the economic powerhouse generally forms the core of a city. And in my mind has always been like, and Singapore is fortunately doing some amazing stuff in distributing the CBDs today, and equally in different parts of the country. And to me, this densification with an economy has led to a highly unequal design of the city itself. And so you say, okay, there's a huge congregation, traffic going in one direction, pollution happening in one direction, resource consumption happening in one direction, and then you have the suburbs, which forms the outer core. And what if the business districts could be done in a different way, and then the people aggregate around distribute. I'm just asking a question. If this is a way where we could make it more inclusive, it's just a thought maybe to David or Taira, who picks it up. Sorry, Kritika, I'm just getting curious out of this question.
Yeah, we need to totally taking out assumptions.
Yes,
Currently we
exactly.
have. Otherwise, it's not possible to make a better city because
Absolutely.
assumption is
Agree.
something wrong. Yeah.
Yep, got it. Okay, sure.
But I also think that a lot of the movement was really pushing towards putting glass towers everywhere. When you start looking at urban areas, I remember even when I lived in Europe, they have the old cities of Europe, right? So if you ever been to Amsterdam or Munich, or they have the old parts, and they were slowly creeping in, putting in new buildings, and again the glass tower sort of concept and everything else. But what Europe realized that a lot of these old cities were centers of innovation. This is a lot where the youth hung out. It was a lot where they had these small little cafes, small little shops and galleries. There was a real mix of people who would end up in the old parts of the cities because it was cheaper to live. That's where most of the students lived. And so this really became their innovation centers and actually became a profit center because a lot of the tourists now go to Europe for these old cities. And I was doing a project in China where they brought me into a very old part of the city, and they wanted to basically, what should they do there? They wanted to create some brand new startup valley or startup village or something like this. And my recommendation to them was really to not tear it down, rejuvenate it. So not renovate it, not tear it down and rebuild it, rejuvenate it, because that's what attracts your tourism. That's what attracts your innovative people, your artists, musicians, your entrepreneurs, and everything else. So I think this is part of the problem now when we look at exactly what you're saying with urban areas. They become too gentrified in a lot of ways. I mean, I wake up in a hotel. Honestly, I could be in any major city in the world because they all look the same. A lot of these office towers look the same, and there's no inspiration from me.
Yeah.
So I like to go into the parks. I like to go into the older parts of the city because that's where the real citizenship is. That's where the real culture is being developed. And I think that's the point you may want to be trying to bring up, that inclusiveness has a lot to do with culture. And if we don't have the environment where culture can thrive and share ideas, new ideas, challenge ideas, well, then you're not going to get this sort of spirit of inclusivity. You're going to get sort of this commonality around, and that is going to start to lock out and make barriers for minorities, make barriers for others to try to enter, because you get a bit of a herd thinking going on.
Yep, sure. Yeah, Kritika.
So now, having spoken about how cities are and how people interact within cities, about inclusivity, let's move on to just knowing about the golden ratio of design between the.
Kritika, maybe you want to take question. Mr. Rao has raised hands.
Yes. Mr. Rao, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Am I audible?
Yes, Mr. Rao.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Actually, mine is not a question, a sort of comments. I quite enjoyed the conversation that's going on from science to technology to art and economics. Is very interesting. Personally, what I'm doing is I'm developing an airport city. Mahesh is aware of that.
Yep.
It's Bengaluru Airport City. It's part of Bangalore International Airport. Last year, it was the fastest growing airport on planet Earth. Okay. So very rapidly growing airport. So this airport city we are designing as sustainable, smart, and vibrant. So whatever the all the components you folks are talking, we actually integrated with the three words: sustainable, smart, and vibrant. And then the planning principles we are doing is very similar to what Singapore does: work, play, live, learn, create. To me, the definition of any city is for the people, by the people, and to the people. The city cannot serve people. Any fancy words we do, I don't think it's useful. That's my comment. And second thing is the cities have to create economic impact and create jobs. So we walk the talk. What we are doing what we are doing in airport city, the type of impact we are creating, we adopted many schools, more than 10 schools we adopted. Certain schools are greenfield, certain schools are brownfield. So the massive change happened in education after our interfering to those schools. Though we are the city people, in the local villages, we adopted schools. We could do it because of the economic impact. So that's one of my comments. So in Airport City, what we are doing, integration of science, art, combination.
I see.
Science and art come together, and also we are bringing heritage into it. Though it is just such a great airport city, in the middle of it, okay, we got Central Park. In that we have a statue, 108-foot statue. We did the groundbreaking a couple of weeks back. It will be completed by next year. Then we use virtual reality to go back to 15th century. How in 15th century Karnataka was. So we are teaching art and culture also through science. That's one comment, okay? So then now, so far these are all my comments. Then my question to David and all the learned people, how do you bring in happiness index, HI I call it, human capital index, HCI, wellness index, WI, and inclusivity index, II. So 4 I's I care for in any city, HI, HCI, WI, II. How do you integrate all those things in any theoretical model by doing ABC factors? All these factors are well balanced. While I do health index very well, but if I fail somewhere else, inclusivity, I'm failing totality. How do you bring all these factors into one model and do an integrated, most optimized model? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the very thought-provoking question. Can we hear it from our panelists now?
I mean, it really comes down. It's sort of like Maslow's pyramid of the selves. I mean, when you talk about wellness, when you talk about happiness, it really is around self-fulfillment. And every individual has a different objective in life. Every individual has different skills, natural skills and learned skills. So people feel happy in different situations. So I think the best way to look at it is sort of to build the environment where people are allowed to be fulfilled. And part of that is education, certainly. As they learn new skills, they become more confident. They take on a little more risk, which makes them feel proud when they succeed, but they start to understand if they have the skill, failures aren't bad. They understand failure a lot better when they have the skills and the competencies. So I think education is one side, and education can be formal education, but it could also be mentoring. It could also be coaching. It could also be the informal peer education when you're surrounded by a group of people that are similar and you're all driving towards a common objective. So education, I think, is one side. And then also when you talk about security, not only security in the sense what Mahesh was talking about, but security in the sense where you can actually direct where you're going. So job security in that sense, you have a voice, you have a vote. You have a vote in what's happening around you. You have the vote in the business you're working for, or you have a vote in the government that you follow. You have a vote in the environment around. You have a vote on where you live and the friends that you want to take and how you're accepted. So I think that these two sides are probably just the top end off the top of my head. It, without getting into a big philosophical, I think it's very doable. But again, it comes down to, as Steve was saying before, it's part of the design process. And it's got to be brought in right from the beginning. These are not add-ons. You can't sort of build infrastructure and add these things in. It has to happen, I think, right at the beginning.
Can we hear it from Mr. Tyson?
Yeah, I think, of course, there are a lot of, each individual may have a different sort of a measurement or happiness. But I think it's, in general, most important part could be human autonomy. We feel like, during the lockdown, we know, right? Everybody feel, oh my God, I couldn't move around. I couldn't do anything. I need to just sit inside of the apartment and I just order, right? It's kind of, I cannot do anything, right? And that's actually we feel, oh my God, right? Not just that, not freedom only, but we couldn't feel we are living, right? We're just contained inside of the container or apartment. And then I think human autonomy is in many sense very important. without human autonomy, like relying on something else, it's including, robots or whatever it is, we rely on many things, like food or work, everything, then we feel no control. But we have empowered, right? Even though we're gonna use the technology, if the technology empower people, I think people have the more autonomy, right? Like 3D printing and radar cutter, actually it's a technology, but that's a democratized technology for the people. Even kids now, they're creating a very beautiful art piece with using 3D printing and also radar cutter, right? And then adults don't know how to do it, but they are empowered, and then that's kind of part of the human autonomy, right? So do ourselves is quite old sort of a concept, but I think it's a human autonomy, empower people, including of course education and learning. I think it's very crucial. Then people feel happiness, at least, right? That's my assumption. Yeah.
And maybe Kritika, I would just jump in more from a wellness and sustainability index for a city. When I came 15 years ago to Singapore, the first thing which strikes to me, great quality of air. You don't feel it compared to where you come from. Bright sunshine, awesome quality of water, great standard of education. And when you come from a different countries with different have-nots and haves, the first thing when you see is there's certain standard of basic essential privileges. If you don't hit this basic essential privileges in different cities, that itself would end up being not so happy in this thing. So when I come to Singapore, I inherit this legacy of certain standards of system. So I'm not worried with this. Now then I become, what do I look? I look for expression, right? I'm not worried with 3 days only I'll get water and 2 days I'm not going to get water, let me store. Or 3 days it's going to be polluted and somebody else is going to burn something, I'm going to smoke bad air, right? And I go after 12 o'clock at night, I'm going to get a gunshot. I'm not aiming at that. Once I achieve these basic standards of a city, either through institutions, where you establish good institutions, or through technology, where you can clean the air, where you can take responsibility of water discharge and building, to me, then my mind is off. And then I'm not worried with this. Then I look at happiness. I look at expression. I look at my freedom. I look at not being judged. I look at being serving to the society. And I hit a different curve. If I don't get these basic privileges at the first place, then I'm struggling to get this for me. And this is basically how a country or a city would prioritize in terms of what it is. And then if people inherit these, then they are looking for different way of handling themselves. And to me, this is very important.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Taira-san.
And after that, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Maybe a bit bored in Singapore because no culture. India, we have Bollywood culture, dancing culture, so fun. There's no culture, right? So
yeah, that's
I think maybe this is a disease, profession, right? I think that's required, right, to be happy.
That's a self-actualization question, right?
It's actually really funny. Humans need drama, right? Without the drama, there wouldn't be art. So we have a problem here.
No. What you would end up doing, according to me, is once you come there, when you're expressing yourself, you would want arts and culture, because then it gets very mundane, right? That's exactly what Taira-san is pointing.
No, but if you think about it, the greatest symphony, they were created in the most troubled times. You know what I mean? So it's...
That's true. If you're not vulnerable...
time for art.
The blues.
Oh yeah, the blues. Anytime, right? So.
Oh, true. Bruce was that. Yeah, true. And jazz.
But the thing is,
but when we talk about inclusiveness, we often talk about people and everything else. But when you talk to go back to Mr. Rao's sort of question, do you ever get this feeling when you walk into a building, you simply feel accepted? It just feels right when you walk into a building, or if you you're walking down the street and you feel accepted into that. I mean, this is part of when you talk about infrastructure. It has to have that feeling. Shopping malls don't have it, because when you get in a shopping mall, you don't know how to leave. You can't find an exit. You don't know where you park. You're always at the wrong level in the wrong elevator, and these types. So the infrastructure, the way that malls, for example, are built, you just don't feel accepted.
Yeah.
where
So that's
I've walked into some buildings and you feel very accepted there. And this is part of the wellness and part of the happiness. Maybe there's some culture, there's some nice music, there's some nice art. It's
Yep.
open area. You know exactly where to go. The signage is really
Acceptance.
good, so you know exactly where to go. You're not confused and you're not threatened. It's a very comforting sort of environment where people are walking around and they mix the diversity. But I think this is part of it as well. That when he's talking about the infrastructure, when we talk about buildings, cement, concrete, these types of things, we have to translate this sort of human, this humanization, I guess.
But still, we
Yeah,
need to
but
go to the security
over
gate, right?
to how
Yeah,
you want to
exactly.
build our cities.
So having brought that up, can we look at how right choices can be made and how can we encourage people to pick up right choices? Because we are talking about choices now, like how one wants to see things. So can we look into how it can be done?
I want to hear Z speak around because this is really a function versus form sort of question, right? In where you do need functionality, but form, the culture, the arts, the intangibles is part of that pleasure feeling and everything else.
I feel it's a lot got to do with the ability to let go and give. I feel this is really the time where where people realize, we have to help each other. Any part of the world you're from, like to find a solution to the vaccine and to various problems in design for protective gear, like designers, scientists around the world have been working together. And it's unprecedented because there was never a need. I mean, the last time I thought was the only reason why the only thing that would make human beings come together was if aliens invaded. You see all these movies, and we have to defend against the aliens.
That's a US classified secret, right?
So, yeah, I just feel that people have to understand that, there's probably nothing more important than this connection, to life itself. And it's something so simple, people take it for granted. Like you think about everything, right? You think about something physical in terms of design. I can't see the person in the workspace, or I'm trying to walk somewhere. There's a lot of resistance in the way it's designed. The kind of padding on the floor isn't right. You sit down, the chair's not the right height. I mean, that's one kind of resistance. But what about, just the human connection, like having enough time in nature and things like that? These are things we can do. And I almost feel that people have become so cold because we were not meant to live in cities. We were never meant to live in a city. I had this really life-changing moment when I visited Norway. I was in the mountains. My Norwegian friend brought me, so you had to drive 4 hours, and then you had to hike 2 hours to reach this one point just to see the river, and it's beautiful. And I actually said to him, you know what, I think I want to come back and die here one day. And he was looking at me like I was crazy. Then I was trying to explain to him, I never felt this at home. You're asking about a place that makes you feel comfortable, David. And I found it in the mountains. I felt so natural there. We belong to nature. Like, we don't realize that we have been so much in a city, and this has never felt right. Yeah, so I feel people have to help each other and realize, everything's connected. There's always repercussions when you take out. We need biodiversity, right? Like, for example, now an obscure animal, the llama possibly has a antibody for the current situation. And it's something that could have an animal that nobody cares about, which could have easily been wiped out, just like a few 100,000 other species, right? And that's the kind of knowledge we are throwing away in our lifetime. And our lifetime as a species is so short, but we managed to throw away so much. It's crazy, right? So, sorry, I'm getting off topic.
No. I think it's quite I resonate because I born in a village, maybe only 100 household, and then the village was almost like the part of nature. Of course, it's a village, right? It's no building at all, and then no rocking. I didn't know how to rock the door because nobody cared. Yeah. People come, then put something. Oh, I harvest this, and then, please eat it. But I think sometimes people know over there, but can open and then put something on top of that.
Wow.
That is happening. So I think at least I experienced sort of a part of the community and as part of the nature, and enjoy the sort of nature harvesting from the nature. So but of course, when I lived in urban situation, of course, total opposite, and then that's why I miss that totally. But I think by using a technology, we can recreate something like a village format, even in urban situation. That's my last hope.
Do you think biomimicry would be the answer for this?
I think the biomimicry, yes.
Really
Design.
creating art that is actually natural or something like that. And
That
I
is
think this is a really interesting point to maybe for Mr. Rao too. But I think biomimicry is really interesting. Material science and this type of thing, really interesting.
So I'm going to just watch out for the iteration 2 of Project Shea. It's all about biomimicry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's going to be Singapore students who are going to do this, and will be, and Kritika is championing it actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Kritika, over to you.
sorry, we changed the topic.
What was the question again?
Actually, we've come to the conclusion. So let's wrap up this panel session. The great minds have spoken, the battle of myth and is over. All nice things begin has to end in a nice way. And here are the takeaway points from a panel discussion. Shift from globalization to ruralization. People preferring to live in their villages and have a home-based learning and work environment. Future cities could be more resilient, having biomimicry as one strategy and environmentally inclusive, and every people is equally treated. So it is more people-centric. Overcoming identity crisis by tapping the wisdom of crowd and collaborative partnership. Current city formats are failing, and there is a need to design new cities keeping in view the basic human needs and standards while focusing on people and redefining profit. Future cities can be designed for humanity with empathy and care. That's about it. So let's recollect from Michael Jackson's song, "We Are the World, We Are the People, and let's make the world a better place."
Yeah, together.
Thank you for joining me in this panel discussion. Wonderful.